The Texas sun had a way of making everything look older than it was. It bleached the wooden fence posts along Route 9 until they turned the color of old bones. It cracked the red clay earth into jagged patterns that resembled broken mirrors. It faded the paint on mailboxes, on barn doors, on the faces of men who spent their whole lives under its unforgiving glare. And in the summer of 2007, it beat down hard on the shoulders of a 19-year-old boy named Lucas Merritt as he hauled a 60-pound feed sack across the dusty yard of the Caldwell Ranch. Lucas wasn't tall, not yet. He was lean in the way that poor boys are lean, not from discipline or exercise, but from not having quite enough to eat on a regular basis. His jeans were a size too big, held up by a canvas belt he'd found in a box of donations at the Baptist church. His boots were cracked along the left sole, and when it rained, which wasn't often in Harlow County, his left sock got wet and stayed wet for the rest of the day. He had dark brown hair that curled slightly at the ears when it got long, which it always did because haircuts cost $12 at Ray's barbershop, and $12 was $12. He had been working at Caldwell Ranch since he was 16. His mother, Sandra Merritt, had arranged it through a woman at her church whose husband had done some fence repair for Douglas Caldwell years back. Sandra was a practical woman who had long since abandoned the luxury of pride. She cleaned houses on the east side of Harlow 3 days a week and waitressed at the Pine Ridge Diner the other 2. Lucas's father had left when Lucas was 8, not dramatically, not with a fight or a scene, but quietly, the way smoke disappears one morning, just not there anymore. Sandra never spoke badly about him. She simply never spoke about him at all, which Lucas eventually understood was worse. Working at Caldwell Ranch meant waking up at 5 in the morning, driving 14 miles on a road that turns to gravel after the first 8, and spending 10 to 12 hours doing whatever needed doing. Feeding livestock, repairing fencing, clearing brush, moving irrigation pipes, cleaning out stalls. There was always something, and Douglas Caldwell made sure that the something always fell to Lucas. Douglas Caldwell was 53 years old that summer, a broad-shouldered man with a gray mustache and pale blue eyes that had the peculiar quality of looking both bored and contemptuous at the same time. He had inherited the ranch from his father, who had inherited it from his father, and he wore that inheritance like a crown. He drove a black Ford F350 that he kept immaculately clean. He wore ostrich skin boots to church. He sat on the county agricultural board and had his photograph taken with the state senator at the county fair every August. He was not a cruel man in the way that some men are cruel, deliberately, with pleasure. He was cruel in the way that powerful men often are, casually, without thinking, the way you might swat a fly without considering the fly. To Douglas Caldwell, Lucas Merritt was simply part of the ranch's operating cost, a line item, a pair of hands attached to a body that required minimal compensation. "Boy, did I ask you to stack those bales on the east side or the west side?" Douglas called out one morning in July, not looking up from the clipboard in his hands. "East side, sir," Lucas said. "Then why are half of them on the west side?" Lucas looked at the bales. They were all on the east side. Every single one. "Sir, I believe they're all. Don't argue with me." Douglas finally looked up, and there was no anger in his face, which somehow made it worse. There was simply impatience. "Just move them." Lucas moved them. All of them. Back and forth from east to west under the July sun, while Douglas's foreman, a stocky man named Brent Okafor, watched from the shade of the equipment shed and said nothing. Brent Okafor was 38, Nigerian-American, a former Army mechanic who had come to work at Caldwell Ranch 7 years earlier. He was not a bad man. He followed Douglas's lead because that was his job, and because he had 2 kids in middle school and a mortgage in town. But there were moments, small moments, when he looked at Lucas with something that resembled apology. He never said anything, but Lucas noticed. There was also Margaret Caldwell, Douglas's wife, who was 10 years younger than her husband and had grown up in Austin. She had a kind face and a habit of bringing out cold lemonade to the workers on hot afternoons without being asked. She always remembered how Lucas took his no sugar, just lemon, and she always called him by his name, which Douglas never did. Douglas called him boy or kid, or sometimes just said hey with a sharp whistle, the way you might call a dog. And then there was Douglas's daughter, Sowers Caldwell, who was 17 that summer and had her mother's kind face and her father's blue eyes and a way of sitting on the top rail of the fence near the horse paddock, reading paperback novels that Lucas found deeply distracting. She had never been unkind to him. She had also never been particularly kind. She existed in a separate world, the world of the ranch's main house with its air conditioning and its satellite television and its refrigerator full of food. And Lucas existed in the world of the yard and the barn and the cracked left boot. He was aware of the distance between those two worlds. He had been aware of it since the first day, but he kept coming back. He came back because the ranch paid $30 a day in cash, which was more than he could make anywhere else in Harlow County at 16. He came back because his mother needed the money. He came back, if he was honest with himself, because there was something about the land itself, the smell of it in the early morning, the way the cattle moved in the low orange light before sunrise, the feeling of physical work completed that made him feel, briefly, like he was something. He had plans. Vague, enormous, slightly embarrassing plans that he kept entirely to himself. He had been reading books about agriculture, about business, about land management. He had borrowed them from the Harlow County Public Library, which had a surprisingly good collection on Texas ranching, and a librarian named Mrs. Patricia Elwood, who had once told him, without any particular emphasis, that he asked smarter questions than most adults she knew. He had kept that sentence inside him like a coal, small and hot, something to press his hands against when everything else was cold. He planned to own land someday. He didn't know how. He didn't know when. He just knew it with the quiet, unshakable certainty that some people know things that haven't happened yet. On a Friday afternoon in late August of 2007, that certainty was tested. It was the last Friday before school started. The County Agricultural Supply Fair was held every year at the Harlow Fairgrounds, and Douglas Caldwell attended every year without exception, bringing several of his ranch hands along to help manage the livestock display he entered in the working cattle category. Lucas was among them that year for the first time. The fairgrounds were crowded. There were other ranchers, suppliers, equipment dealers, feed company representatives, local politicians. There were families with children eating corn dogs. There was a live country band playing on a small stage near the main pavilion. The smell of livestock and fried food and hay mixed together in the heavy afternoon air. Lucas had been assigned to manage the water and feed station for Caldwell's display cattle, 3 prize winning Black Angus that Douglas had been preparing for months. It was not a glamorous assignment, but Lucas took it seriously. He had read about the specific nutritional needs of Black Angus's cattle in competition condition. He had arrived early to make sure the water troughs were clean. He had checked the feed mix twice. What happened was this. One of the cattle, a 2-year-old bull named Ranger that had a history of agitation in crowds, became distressed by the noise of the band and pulled loose from his lead. Lucas had been in the process of adjusting the feed when it happened. He grabbed the lead immediately, but Ranger was 800 pounds of frightened animal, and the result was predictable. Lucas was dragged through the dirt for approximately 15 feet before he was able to brace himself against a fence post and bring the animal to a stop. He was covered in dirt and manure. His shirt was torn at the shoulder. He had a deep scrape along his right forearm that was bleeding steadily. He had also, crucially, kept hold of the lead. Ranger had not gotten loose into the fairgrounds crowd. No one had been hurt. Douglas Caldwell had not seen any of this. He had been 30 yards away talking to a feed distributor. What he saw, arriving at the display area seconds after the incident, was Lucas, dirty, torn, bleeding, holding a now calm Ranger. What in the hell happened here? Douglas's voice was loud. Several people nearby turned to look. He spooked, sir. I caught him before you look like you rolled in a pig pen. Douglas surveyed the scene, the overturned water bucket, the scattered feed, the dirt. His voice had not dropped. If anything, it had gotten louder. I brought you here to manage a feed station. 3 simple cattle. And you can't even do that without turning it into a circus. Sir the bull, I don't want to hear excuses. Douglas turned to address the small gathering of onlookers that had formed. Other ranchers, their workers, a couple of fair officials. He seemed almost to lean into their presence the way some men do when an audience arrives. This is exactly the problem with hiring these charity cases, he said. You think you're doing someone a favor and they just cost you more than they're worth. Charity cases. The words landed in the hot afternoon air and stayed there. Lucas did not move. He was still holding Ranger's lead. His arm was bleeding. His face was completely still, not because he felt nothing, but because he had learned very young that showing what you felt in moments like this only made it worse. Brent Okafor had appeared at the edge of the crowd. Lucas saw him look at Douglas, then look at the ground. Margaret Caldwell was not there. Source was. She was standing about 20 feet back holding a paper cup of lemonade, and when Lucas's eyes found her face, he saw something there, discomfort, maybe shame, and then she looked away. That was the worst part. Not the words, the looking away. Give me the lead, Douglas said, stepping forward and taking it from Lucas's hand. He did not look at Lucas when he did it, as if the interaction were already over. As if Lucas had already ceased to exist. Lucas walked away from the display area. He walked past the food stalls and the equipment dealers and the country band, who were now playing a slow song about coming home. He walked to his truck, a 1998 Chevy with 210,000 miles on it, and he sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine. He sat there for 22 minutes. He knew because he watched the clock on the dashboard. He watched it because if he didn't fix his eyes on something, he was not sure what would happen. Then he started the engine and drove home. He did not go back to Caldwell Ranch on Monday. He did not go back the following week. He did not go back at all. His mother asked him twice what had happened. He told her there had been a disagreement and that he would find other work. Sandra looked at him for a long moment, the way mothers look at their children when they know there's more to the story but also know that pressing will only close the door further. Then she nodded and said she had heard the hardware store on Main Street was hiring. Lucas worked at the hardware store for 6 months. Then he took a job doing agricultural consulting for a county extension office, which paid less but gave him access to land management data and agricultural reports that he read with focused, furious attention. Then he enrolled in the agricultural business program at Texas A&M University on a combination of merit scholarship and federal loans. Then he graduated. Then he got a job with a mid-size agricultural investment firm in Dallas. Then, after 4 years, he left that firm and started his own. He was not in Harlow County for any of it. He did not go back for 15 years. But he never once stopped thinking about the Caldwell Ranch, about the way the cattle moved in the low orange light before sunrise, about what it would feel like to stand on that land and know that it was his, about the words, charity case. He had kept those two alongside Mrs. Elwood's compliment, but they burned differently. They didn't warm him, they pushed him. And on the nights when the work was hardest and the doubt was loudest, he pressed his hands against both of them, the warmth and the burn together, and kept moving. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning in March of 2022. Lucas Merritt was 34 years old. He was sitting in his office on the 14th floor of a glass building in downtown Austin, reviewing a land acquisition portfolio that represented approximately $40 million in agricultural assets across 3 states. He was wearing a dark gray suit that fit him correctly. His boots, he still wore boots, were Lucchese, dark brown calfskin, and had cost $800. He had bought them 3 years ago and thought of them every time he put them on. The call was from a real estate attorney named Gerald Fitch, who represented the Caldwell estate. "Mr. Merritt, I'll be direct with you," Fitch said. The Caldwell Ranch in Harlow County has been listed for distressed sale. The estate is carrying significant debt, approximately $2.4 million in agricultural loans, plus back property taxes. They're looking for a buyer who can close within 60 days. Given your profile and your interest in Texas ranch properties, I thought you might want to take a look. Lucas was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. "Send me the documents," he said. He reviewed them that evening in his apartment, spread across the kitchen table with a glass of water and a yellow legal pad. The ranch was in worse shape than he had imagined. Douglas Caldwell had died 18 months earlier. Heart attack, the obituary had said, though Lucas had not read it in full. The estate had passed to Source, who is now 32 and apparently living on the property with her young son. The agricultural operation had been declining for years. Drought, market shifts, mismanagement, the usual combination of factors that brought a once proud ranch to its knees. The land itself was still excellent. 1,200 acres of prime Central Texas range, good water table, quality soil. Lucas had known that since he was 16. He made an offer the following morning. The offer was accepted within 48 hours. He drove to Harlow County on a Thursday. He had not been back in 15 years. The road that turned to gravel after the first 8 miles had been paved since then. He noticed that the Pine Ridge Diner where his mother used to work was still there. The sign faded, but the parking lot half full at 10 in the morning. The Baptist church had a new roof. The hardware store on Main Street had become a Mexican restaurant. The town was the same town, only quieter. Some towns get louder as they grow. Harlow had gotten quieter. He turned onto the ranch road and drove past the fence posts that had once looked like old bones in the sun. They had been replaced more recently than everything else had been maintained, which suggested that someone had been trying. The main gate had a new latch. There were fresh tire tracks in the dirt. He parked in front of the main house and sat for a moment with the engine off. The house was smaller than he remembered. He had been aware, intellectually, that this would be the case, that almost everything from childhood is larger in memory than in reality. But it still surprised him. The wide porch with the wooden swing, the big kitchen window that faced the yard, the cottonwood tree at the corner that had grown enormous, taller than the roof now, its branches spreading out like cupped hands. He got out of the truck. The front door opened before he reached the porch steps. Source Caldwell looked at him across the distance of the yard, across 15 years, across everything, and her expression did something complicated that he couldn't fully read. She was 32 now, her dark hair shorter than it had been, wearing jeans and a work shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows. She had her father's blue eyes, and they were fixed on him with an intensity that he felt somewhere behind his sternum. "Lucas Merritt," she said. Her voice was steady. Her eyes were not. "Miss Caldwell," he said. He climbed the porch steps. The kitchen of the Caldwell house was exactly as Lucas had imagined it, and nothing like it. In his imagination, which had constructed and deconstructed this room approximately 1,000 times over 15 years, it had always been a place of obvious wealth, gleaming appliances, polished floors, the casual abundance of people who never had to count anything. What he found instead was a working kitchen, worn in the way that working things get worn. The linoleum floor scuffed pale near the stove. The countertop edged with a crack that had been carefully caulked but not replaced. The refrigerator, a model that was at least 10 years old. A child's drawing was held to it by a magnet shaped like an armadillo. A half-finished cup of coffee sat on the table next to a stack of manila folders. Source did not offer him the coffee. She gestured at a chair and sat across from him and folded her hands on the table with the composure of someone who had been preparing for this conversation for a while. "I want to say something before we start," she said. "All right. What my father said to you at the fair in 2007. She paused. She looked at her hands, then back at him. "I was there. I heard it. I didn't say anything, and I have thought about that a lot over the years. I want you to know that. Lucas had not expected this. He had prepared himself on the drive down for a number of possible versions of this meeting: defensiveness, bitterness, desperation, pride. He had not prepared himself for this. I appreciate that, he said. I'm not asking you to accept an apology for something my father did. That's his to account for, wherever he is. Her voice was even, but it had edges. I'm only telling you that I know what happened and that I know it matters. I wanted to say it before we talked about anything else. Lucas looked at her for a moment. All right, he said again. There was a brief silence, and then they both moved, with a kind of mutual and unspoken agreement, into the business of the matter at hand. Source opened one of the manila folders. I assume you've reviewed the debt documentation. I have. Then you know we're not in a position to negotiate terms significantly. She said it without self-pity, which he respected. The agricultural loans come due in full in November. We've been servicing the interest but not the principal for 2 years. The back taxes are from 2019 and 2020. We had 2 consecutive drought years, and my father chose to defer rather than reduce operations. That was his decision, and I've been living with the consequences of it. The land is still in good condition, Lucas said. Better than the financial picture suggests. I know what the land is worth. She said it quietly, without aggression, but it landed clearly. She was not a woman who needed to be told the value of something she had grown up on. I know you do, he said, equally quiet. That wasn't a negotiating point. It was an observation. She looked at him for a moment, recalibrating slightly. What are your intentions for the property? He leaned back in the chair. Expansion of an existing operation. I have 3 other Texas ranches under management. This one completes a corridor I have been building in Central Texas: water rights, grazing rotation, supply chain efficiency. It's not sentimental, it's a business decision. Is any part of it sentimental? He met her eyes. Yes. She held his gaze for a beat, then looked back at the folders. My son is 6 years old. His name is Aaron. His father is not in the picture. I have been managing this ranch since my father's health declined 3 years before he died, and I have done it poorly in some ways and adequately in others, and the honest answer is that I don't have the capital or the expertise to bring it back to what it should be. She closed the folder. I need the sale to proceed. What I'd like to know, what I'm asking you directly, is what happens to the people who work here after it does. Lucas had also prepared for this question. There were 4 full-time employees remaining on the ranch. Brent Okafor, now 53, who had been there longer than anyone. A young hand named Caleb Hutchins, 24, who had grown up on a neighboring property. A ranch cook and housekeeper named Dorothy Vasquez, 61, who had worked for the Caldwells for 18 years. And a part-time equipment mechanic named Roy Sims, who came 3 days a week from town. I've reviewed the employment records, Lucas said. I intend to retain all current staff at current compensation, with a review at 6 months and an increased structure tied to operational performance. Dorothy Vasquez's position is domestic, but if she'd like to transition to a ranch management support role, there may be capacity. Those are conversations I'd like to have with each of them individually. Source was quiet for a moment. Something in her face had shifted, not softened, exactly, but opened slightly like a window that had been painted shut and someone had run a knife along the edge of the frame. What about the house? That's a separate conversation I'd like to have with you. She straightened. I'm not asking for charity. I'm not offering it. He said it without sharpness. I'm saying there are options worth discussing that don't require you to be out of the house in 60 days. That's a business consideration, not a personal one. A working ranch operates better with experienced people on site. You mean you want me to stay on as ranch manager? I want to have a conversation about whether that's something that would work for both of us. You know this land. I know agricultural business. Those are not incompatible. Source Caldwell looked at him for a long time, the kind of look that is actually several different looks layered on top of each other. He could feel the weight of it, the complexity. He did not look away. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "Of course," he said. He left the house 20 minutes later with a signed preliminary agreement and the distinct sensation of something large and long-held beginning, slowly, to shift. Brent Okafor was in the equipment shed when Lucas found him. He was working on a tractor hydraulic line, his big hands steady and competent, a parts manual open on the workbench beside him. He looked up when Lucas came in, and there was a long moment in which neither of them said anything. Then Brent wiped his hands on a shop rag slowly and set it down. He looked at Lucas with an expression that contained no performance whatsoever. "I didn't say anything," Brent said. "At the fair. I saw what he did, and I didn't say anything." "I know," Lucas said. "I told myself I needed the job. That's true. But it's not a good enough reason." Lucas looked at him for a moment. Brent Okafor had aged the way some men age well. More solid, more settled, the lines on his face suggesting experience rather than wear. There was a dignity to him that had always been there, Lucas realized, but that he had only partially seen when he was 19 and too caught up in his own humiliation to see much of anything else clearly. "I'm not here to settle scores, Brent," Lucas said. "I want you to know that straightforwardly." Brent nodded, once, a slow movement. "I'd like you to stay on, as head of operations. That means you'd be managing the other hands, the equipment maintenance schedule, and the livestock rotation program. It's what you've been doing, but with the title and the compensation to match." Brent was quiet for a moment. "Douglas never gave me the title," he said, not bitterly. "Just as a fact." "I know," Lucas said. "He should have." Brent looked out the open end of the equipment shed at the yard, at the midday light on the dry grass, at the cattle visible in the far pasture. He was silent for a long time. "All right," he said. "I'll stay." He picked up the shop rag again and looked back at the hydraulic line. Then he stopped and looked back at Lucas. "You kept hold of that lead," he said, "at the fair. 800 pounds of scared animal, and you kept hold. I saw that. I should have said so at the time." Lucas looked at him steadily. "Thank you for saying it now." Caleb Hutchins was 24 and had the open, sunburned face of a young man who had spent his entire life outdoors and saw no reason to change that. He had heard that the ranch had been sold and had spent the past 2 weeks in a state of managed anxiety that he had expressed, primarily by working harder and talking less. When Lucas introduced himself and outlined the retention plan, Caleb shook his hand with both hands, a reflex, clearly rather than a calculated gesture, and said, "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir," with a directness that Lucas found entirely winning. "You don't need to call me sir," Lucas said. "Yes, sir," said Caleb. Dorothy Vasquez was harder. She was a small woman with silver-threaded black hair and the particular energy of someone who has been holding things together for a long time and has become so accustomed to it that she would not know what to do if she stopped. She had worked for the Caldwells since Soers was a teenager. She had cooked Douglas Caldwell's last meal, chicken soup, because he'd had a cold 3 days before his heart attack. She looked at Lucas with eyes that assessed and weighed and held their judgment carefully. "Miss Sowers needs to stay," she said. It was the first thing she said to him before any discussion of her own position. "I've spoken with Miss Caldwell about that," Lucas said. "She won't ask you for things," Dorothy said. "She'll say she doesn't need them, even when she does. She's been doing that her whole life, and it's gotten worse since her father died because she thinks she has to be strong for Aaron." A pause. "That little boy loves this land. He was born in this county. Whatever you decide to do with this place, he needs to be somewhere he can put his feet on ground that means something to him." Lucas held Dorothy Vasquez's gaze. He thought about Sandra Merritt, his own mother, whose practicality had worn away the luxury of pride until there was almost none left, but who had, even so, always made sure he had a place whose ground meant something to him. "I understand," he said. Dorothy looked at him for another moment, running some internal calculation. Then she nodded in a way that conveyed both a conditional approval and a warning, and went back to her kitchen. That evening, Lucas drove to the far northeast corner of the property, where the land rose slightly, and a line of live oak trees followed the course of a seasonal creek. He had found this place when he was 17, on a day when Douglas had sent him to check the fence line along the county road. He had sat under one of the oaks and eaten a peanut butter sandwich and looked out over the land and felt, for a brief and vivid moment, that it was his. He sat under the same oak now. The creek was running. It had been a wet spring, and the sound of it mixed with the late afternoon wind in the leaves. The cattle were visible in the middle distance, small dark shapes moving slowly across the grass. The sky was enormous and going gold. He sat there for a long time, not thinking about business or strategy or the long wait of the past 15 years. He was just present in the moment, in the smell of the land, the sound of the water, the feeling of the bark against his back. His phone buzzed twice. He left it in his pocket. When the light finally faded and the first stars became visible, he drove back to the house and knocked on the front door. Source answered with Aaron beside her, a small boy with her dark hair and wide, serious eyes, wearing a t-shirt with a dinosaur on it and holding a piece of toast as though it were evidence. "This is Mr. Merritt," Source told him. Aaron looked at Lucas with the focused evaluation of a 6-year-old. "Do you have a horse?" he asked. "Not yet," Lucas said, "but I plan to." Aaron appeared to find this satisfactory. He took a bite of his toast and retreated into the house. Source watched him go, and when she looked back at Lucas, there was something in her expression that was different from the morning, still guarded, but lighter, as if some of the weight she'd been carrying had shifted, not disappeared, but redistributed into a position that was, for the moment, more manageable. "I've been thinking about your offer," she said, "and I want to discuss terms," she said. "Real terms, not charity terms." "That's exactly what I want to discuss," he said. She opened the door wider. He stepped inside. The first complication arrived 10 days after Lucas took formal possession of the property, in the form of a certified letter from the law offices of a Dallas firm named Reardon and Bryce. The letter informed Lucas that a claim had been filed against the Caldwell estate by one William Douglas Caldwell Jr., Douglas's Caldwell son from a previous marriage, who had been living in Phoenix and who alleged that he had been improperly excluded from his father's estate and that the sale of the property should be subject to a stay pending resolution of his claims. Lucas read the letter twice at the kitchen table while Source stood at the counter with a cup of coffee going cold in her hand. "I should have told you about William," she said. "Yes," Lucas said. "You should have." She sat down across from him. The morning light was coming through the big kitchen window. The same window he had seen from the yard for 3 summers when he was a teenager. And she looked tired in it, not just from the morning, but from something older and more accumulated. "William is my half-brother," she said. "He's 41. My father and his mother were together before he married my mother. It wasn't a marriage, just a relationship, but William was born from it. My father acknowledged him financially for years, paid child support, paid for college, set up a trust fund when William turned 25, but he never included him in the estate." He said. She stopped, pressed her lips together. "What did he say?" "He said William was provided for, and that the ranch was a family legacy, and that the family was me and my mother." A pause. "My mother passed away 4 years before my father, so by the time the estate was settled, it was just me and William. And William believes he has a claim." "William is angry," Sower said, with a kind of weariness that suggested this was not a new or simple anger. "He has been angry for a long time. The money was never the point, I think. The point was that my father treated him like a problem that had been handled rather than a person who has owed something." She looked at her coffee cup. "I'm not saying he's wrong." Lucas set the letter down on the table. "How strong is his legal position?" "My attorney says limited, but not negligible. It could delay the transfer of certain assets. It could create complications with the property title." She looked up. I should have disclosed this in due diligence. I know that. I was hoping it would resolve itself. He looked at her steadily. It won't resolve itself. I know. She met his eyes. I'm sorry. Lucas, I was managing too many things at once and I made a decision that was not in your interest, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. He was quiet for a moment. Is there a path to settlement? Possibly. If he gets what he actually wants, which is, she was quiet for a moment. To be acknowledged, to be part of something that was his father's. To not be, she stopped again. When she continued, her voice was lower. To not be the person who was provided for and then forgotten. Lucas felt something move in him at those words, something that came from a deep and specific place. Set up a meeting, he said. With William? Yes. Source looked at him with an expression he couldn't fully read. Why? Because I want to talk to him. William Caldwell drove down from Phoenix in a rental car and arrived at the ranch on a Tuesday morning 2 weeks later. He was tall, broad like his father, with dark skin and angular features that came from his mother's side. Nothing of Douglas Caldwell visible in his face, except, occasionally, in the set of his jaw. He was impeccably dressed in a way that read as armor rather than style. Pressed slacks, a crisp shirt, shoes that cost money. He had the bearing of a man who had learned early to take up space with intention, because if he didn't, someone would take it from him. He shook Lucas's hand in the driveway and looked at the main house and at the yard with an expression of controlled neutrality. You grew up here? Lucas asked. I visited, William said. Twice. When I was 7 and when I was 12. My father brought me both times and then seemed to regret it afterward, so he stopped. A pause. Source was for the first time. She wouldn't remember. Source was standing on the porch. Lucas could see her from the corner of his eye. She was very still. Come inside, Lucas said. They sat in the living room, a room full of Douglas Caldwell's things, his photographs on the walls, his books on the shelves, a mounted deer head above the fireplace that looked down on everything with glassy impartiality. William looked at the photographs for a long time without speaking. There was one of Douglas at the county fair, one of the years after 2007, receiving an agricultural board commendation. He looked exactly as Lucas remembered him, broad, gray-mustached, self-satisfied. He was a complicated man, William said. Yes, Source said. That's a charitable way to put it. Williams's voice was even but tight, like a string tuned slightly too high. He paid for my college, and he made sure I knew every time the tuition payment was made that he was doing me a favor. Not a responsibility, a favor. He paused. I graduated summa cum laude, and he sent a card. Signed it with his full name, Douglas R. Caldwell, like I was a business associate. The room was very quiet. I'm not here to relitigate my father's choices, William said then, with what seemed like a conscious effort toward steadiness. He looked at Lucas. I understand you're the new owner of this property. I understand the estate sale was legally executed. My attorney's position is technical in nature, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not entirely convinced I want to pursue it. Then why file it? Lucas asked. William looked at him. Because I wanted someone to have to ask me to stop. A pause. Because I wanted someone to sit across from me and treat this like something that mattered. He looked around the room again, at the photographs, at the mounted deer head, at the window with the view of the yard. I've spent 35 years trying to matter to this place, or to someone connected to it. Lucas looked at him for a long moment, then he said, Tell me about what you do. William blinked. What? Your work. What do you do in Phoenix? A beat of confusion then. I'm a land surveyor. Municipal contracts primarily, but some private agricultural work. He paused. Why? Because I'm building a corridor of Central Texas ranch properties, and I have a significant need for accurate land surveying, particularly on water rights boundaries and easement assessments. And I'm currently using a firm out of San Antonio that I'm not entirely satisfied with. Lucas kept his tone level and professional. I'm not offering you charity. I'm asking if your firm does work in Texas and if you'd be interested in having a conversation about a contract." The room was absolutely silent. William Caldwell looked at Lucas Merritt with an expression that went through several visible stages: suspicion, assessment, something that cracked briefly open and was quickly managed closed again. "My firm does work in Texas," he said carefully. "Then let's talk," Lucas said. Sowers, sitting across the room, made a sound that was not quite a word and not quite anything else. Lucas glanced at her. There were tears on her face, moving quietly one at a time, in the way that tears move when someone has been holding them back for a long time and has simply run out of reasons to keep doing so. William looked at his half-sister. Something moved across his face, cautious, uncertain, but real. "I didn't know you," he said to her. It was not an accusation. It was almost a statement of grief. "I wanted to, but he never—" "I know," Seward said. Her voice was steady despite the tears. "I know he didn't. I'm sorry." William looked at his hands. Then he looked up at the photograph of Douglas Caldwell on the wall. Then he looked back at his sister. "He was your father," he said. "Not mine, not really, I know that." A pause. "But this land was his, and that means it's something we both come from." "Yes," Source said, "it does." Outside, through the window, Aaron had appeared in the yard, chasing one of the ranch dogs with the focused intensity of a 6-year-old who has identified a purpose. The dog was faster and also fully aware of the game, circling back repeatedly to make sure Aaron remained engaged. William watched them through the window for a moment. "Is that your son?" "That's Aaron," Sowers said. "He looks like you." "He has my father's stubbornness," she said, "and, fortunately, nothing else." Something shifted in Williams's face at that, a softening, almost imperceptible, but there. He looked at Lucas. "I'll withdraw the filing," he said. "Tell your attorney." "Thank you," Lucas said, "and I'll have my office send you our service profile." William stood, straightening his shirt. He looked around the room one more time, taking in all of it. The photographs, the deer head, the worn furniture, the view of the yard where a small boy was still chasing a dog through the afternoon light. He was quiet for a moment. "It's a good piece of land," he said. "Yes," Lucas said, "it is." The second complication was smaller and more personal, and arrived not in the form of a letter, but in the form of a conversation with Dorothy Vasquez at 6:30 on a Thursday morning, when Lucas came into the kitchen to find the coffee already made and Dorothy already at the table, with an expression that meant she had something to say and had been waiting for an appropriate moment and had decided this was it. She told him about the summer of 2004, about a young woman named Renata, who had worked at the ranch for one season, a college student from San Antonio, the daughter of one of Douglas's cattle suppliers. About what Douglas Caldwell had said to Renata at a ranch gathering in front of other employees. A comment that had been sexual in nature and which Dorothy described with precise, flat economy because she was not a woman who used euphemism to soften things that should not be softened. She told him that Renata had left the following day and never come back, that she had called Margaret Caldwell privately, and that Margaret had listened in silence and then apologized and then done nothing, that Dorothy had kept this information for 18 years because she was 61 years old and had spent her adult life understanding, with painful clarity, which battles she could afford to fight and which ones would only destroy her. She was telling him now, she said, because he was the owner of this property and because she believed he was a man who should know what kind of place he was steward of, including the parts that were not in the deed. "I'm not asking you to do anything with it," Dorothy said. "I'm not sure there's anything to be done. The man is dead and Renata has a life somewhere that doesn't include this ranch." She paused. "I'm telling you because you deserve to know what ground you're standing on." Lucas was quiet for a long time. "Do you know where she is?" he asked. "Renata? I have an email address. We kept in contact on and off. Would she be willing to talk to me?" Dorothy looked at him. "About what?" "I don't know yet," he said honestly, "but if she's willing, I'd like to listen." Dorothy considered this for a long moment. Then she got up, poured him a cup of coffee, set it in front of him, and went to find her phone. Renata Solano was 38 years old and lived in Houston, where she worked as an agricultural policy analyst for a nonprofit focused on rural land rights. She had a clear, measured voice on the phone, and the particular stillness of someone who has spent years learning to be precise about difficult things. She had not thought about the Caldwell Ranch in a long time, she said. Or rather, she had not allowed herself to think about it in a way that was useful. It had been the thing she put in a box on a high shelf in a room she didn't go into. I was 20 years old, she told Lucas. I needed the summer income. My father had a business relationship with Douglas Caldwell, and I don't know what I thought, that it was a professional environment, that being my father's daughter would mean something in terms of how I was treated. I'm sorry, Lucas said. You weren't there, Renata said. No, he said. I know. But I was there other times, in other ways, and I know what kind of man he was, and I'm sorry that you experienced it. A silence. Then, Dorothy said, you bought the ranch. Yes, why are you calling me? It was a direct question, and it deserved a direct answer. Because Dorothy told me what happened, and I believe that the history of a place should be acknowledged, not buried. I can't undo what he did. I can't give you anything that makes it right. But I wanted you to hear from me as the person who now holds this land, that what happened to you was wrong, and that I know it, and that you are not forgotten. Another silence, longer. That's an unusual thing to say, Renata said. Maybe. Why does it matter to you? He's dead. The ranch is yours. You could have just let it be. Lucas thought about how to answer that. He thought about 19 years old and cracked boots and 60 pounds of feed in the July sun. He thought about Charity Case ringing out across the fairgrounds. He thought about Sewers looking away. Because I know what it feels like to be made small on that land, he said. And I know that it doesn't just go away, it stays in you. And I believe the people it stayed in deserve to have someone acknowledge that it happened, even if it's 15 years late. He heard Renata breathe, slow and deliberate, on the other end of the line. I don't need anything from you, she said finally. I know, he said, I'm not offering anything. Just acknowledgement. Another pause. Then, carefully, there's a land rights issue in Harlow County that my organization has been tracking. Smallholders on the south side of the county, mostly Hispanic families, some of them third generation, who are facing pressure from a development consortium that's been acquiring property through methods that aren't entirely clean. Legally ambiguous, but ethically clear. She paused. You own 1,200 acres in that county now. You have relationships with the agricultural board? That kind of position can be used in different ways. Lucas was quiet for a moment. Send me the documentation, he said. You'd actually look at it? I'd actually look at it, he said. He heard something change in her voice, not softness exactly, but a recalibration, a slight lowering of a guard that had been fully raised. All right, she said, I'll send it. She sent it that afternoon. He read it that night. The situation was exactly as she had described, a pattern of below-market pressures, manufactured code violations, and selective enforcement that was pushing long-established families off land they had held for generations. Lucas was familiar with the tactics. He had seen them in other counties, other states. He knew people on the Texas Agricultural Commission. He made 3 phone calls the following morning before 7 a.m. None of this was about the Caldwell Ranch specifically, but all of it was about the same thing: what can the land carries, and who gets to decide what it's for. The conversation with Sewers that he had been avoiding happened on a Friday evening, 3 weeks after he had taken possession of the property. He had been avoiding it not out of cowardice, but out of a desire to let the earlier conversation settle, the one about William, the one about her father's debts, the one about what role she would play going forward. There had been a lot of settling required, and he had wanted to give it time. But Source was not a woman who waited for things to be brought to her. She found him at the fence line near the north pasture, where he had been checking the irrigation setup as the sun went down, and she leaned on the top rail and looked out at the pasture and said, without preamble, Why didn't you come back angry?" He looked at her. The evening light was in her hair, which was loose for once rather than pulled back, and there were shadows under her eyes that suggested she had not been sleeping as well as she appeared to during the day. "I was angry," he said. "For how long?" "A long time." He turned back to the pasture. The cattle were moving toward the far water trough in a slow, purposeful drift. Then for a while, it was more useful than angry. It made me work harder. And then eventually, it was just... He paused, quieter. "Did you come back to prove something to him?" "He was dead before I bought the property, I know. But you could have found out he was dead and chosen a different ranch. There are other ranches in central Texas." Lucas was quiet for a moment. The light was almost gone now. The sky a deep blue-violet at the horizon. "Yes," he said finally. "I came back to prove something. But not to him. To yourself. To myself." She nodded, slow, as if confirming something she had already suspected. "My father was not a good man, in a lot of ways," she said. "I spent a long time trying to believe he was, because I loved him, and because he was mine. And then he died, and the grief was complicated because you can grieve someone and also know clearly that they did things that were wrong." She paused. "I used to think that was a contradiction. I don't think that anymore." "It's not a contradiction," Lucas said. "It's just real." She was quiet for a moment. Then, very quietly, "I'm glad you bought this place. I didn't think I would be. I thought it would feel like losing it. It doesn't feel like that. What does it feel like?" She thought about it. The last of the light faded as she did, and the first stars appeared faint and white in the darkening sky. "Like the land is still the land," she said. "Like it was always bigger than any one person's claim on it, including his." They stood at the fence in the dark for a while, not speaking, listening to the cattle and the wind and the seasonal creek that ran somewhere in the middle distance with the sound of something persistent and clean. "I want to say yes to the ranch manager position," Sowers said finally. "Then say yes," Lucas said. "I need it to be professional," she said. "Clear boundaries, clear responsibilities, clear compensation." "I'm not," she stopped, started again. "I need it to be something I've earned, not something I've been given." "That's exactly what it is," he said. She nodded again, and this time the nod was different, resolute, grounded, the kind of nod that is actually a decision rather than just an agreement. "All right," she said. "All right," he said. They walked back toward the house through the dark, the lights of it visible ahead, warm and yellow. Aaron's bedroom window still lit. He was a child who fought bedtime with focused, creative persistence, and Dorothy's kitchen light bright through the big window. Lucas felt the ground beneath his feet as he walked. The same ground he had walked at 16, at 17, at 19. The same red clay earth under different feet, at a different time, under a different arrangement of stars. The same land. Still the land. The day that became the day happened in late June, 6 weeks after Lucas had taken ownership of the property. It had not been planned as anything significant. It was a Saturday, and Saturdays on a working ranch were like any other day in terms of livestock and equipment and the unceasing demands of land and animals. But Brent Okafor had mentioned the previous week that several former Caldwell Ranch employees, men and women who had worked there over the years and moved on to other things, had heard about the transition, and some of them had reached out wondering if a gathering of some kind might happen. Sowers had picked up the idea and run with it with the focus energy she applied to everything. She had called people. Dorothy had cooked. Caleb had helped set up folding tables in the yard under the cottonwood tree, which was enormous and shading, in exactly the right shape for the purpose. By 10 in the morning, there were perhaps 30 people in the yard. Some of them Lucas knew. Most he didn't. There were men and women who had worked the ranch across 3 decades, their ages ranging from early 20s to late 70s. There were families, spouses, children, in some cases grandchildren. There was a man named Franklin Cross who had been Brent's predecessor as foreman, now 74, and living in a retirement community in San Antonio, who had driven 3 hours because Dorothy had called him specifically, and Dorothy's calls were not refused. There was a woman named Linda Hutchins, Caleb's aunt, who had worked the Caldwell cattle operation for 12 years in the 90s and who embraced Brent in the driveway with a genuine warmth that spoke of a long friendship. Aaron, who had been vibrating with anticipation since 6 a.m., moved through the crowd with the authority of a host who had not been assigned the role but had simply assumed it, introducing himself to everyone with full name and a firm handshake in a way that he had clearly learned from observing adults and practiced in his room. "I'm Aaron Caldwell," he told Franklin Cross, extending his small hand. "My mom runs this ranch now." Franklin Cross shook Aaron's hand with appropriate gravity. "That's good news," he said, and looked over Aaron's head at Source with a smile of genuine warmth. Source was everywhere at once, welcoming people, making introductions, refilling glasses, managing the flow with the practiced ease of someone who had been running gatherings like this since she was a teenager at her father's agricultural board functions. But the manner was entirely different. Where Douglas Caldwell had hosted to be seen, Source hosted to connect. It was visible in every small exchange, the way she remembered her name, the way she asked a specific question that showed she had listened the last time they spoke, the way she made each person feel that their presence specifically was what mattered. Lucas stood at the edge of it and watched. Brent found him there. He stood beside him with a cold drink, and they watched the yard together for a while without speaking. "Did you plan this?" Brent asked. "Source planned it," Lucas said. "Did you want it to happen?" Lucas thought about it. "Yes," he said. Brent nodded. He was looking at Franklin Cross, who was now sitting with Dorothy at one of the tables, their heads close together, clearly revisiting something from a long time ago that was making Dorothy laugh. "Franklin hired me," Brent said. 1999. I had my Army discharge papers and a reference from a mechanic in San Angelo, and he hired me on a handshake. Douglas inherited me when Franklin retired. A pause. "Franklin always told me I'd be foreman one day." Douglas kept finding reasons to put it off. He was quiet for a moment. 23 years. 23 years, Lucas agreed. And you put it right in the first week. It was overdue. Brent was quiet again. Then, without turning his head, "Lucas, I want to ask you something directly." "Go ahead." "Is this real? What you're building here? Is it real or is it a—" He paused, choosing his word carefully. "Is it a point you're making?" It was the most direct thing Brent had said to him, and it was the right question. Lucas respected it. "Both, maybe," Lucas said. "In the beginning, there was a point being made. I'd be lying if I said there wasn't." He looked out at the yard, at the people under the cottonwood tree, at Aaron currently attempting to demonstrate something to Franklin Cross using elaborate hand gestures. "But this," he gestured at the yard, "at all of it, this is real. The land is real, the people are real, the work is real." He paused. "The point dissolves when the real things take its place. He stopped. "That's what?" Brent asked. "That's how I know I'm here for the right reasons. When the anger stops feeling useful, and what's left is just—" He looked at the yard, at Dorothy laughing, at Source in conversation with a woman Lucas didn't know, both of them leaning slightly toward each other in the way of women who have immediately recognized something in each other, at Aaron, now sitting beside Franklin Cross with the focused attention of a child being told something that seems important. Just this. Brent looked at the yard too. He was quiet for a long time. "My kids don't understand why I stayed here so long," he said. "They're both in college now, one in Houston, one in Austin. They think this county is—" He made a gesture that suggested smallness. "They think I could have done more somewhere else." "Maybe," Lucas said. "Maybe," Brent agreed. "But the land got into me. The same way it gets into everyone who works it long enough. You stop thinking about what it is and start thinking about what it could be." He paused. "That's why you're here." "Yes," Lucas said. "That's why I'm here." The moment happened in the early afternoon, when the food had been eaten, and the initial noise of reunion had settled into the quieter, deeper register of people who have found their conversations and are settled into them. Lucas had been in the equipment shed with Caleb and Roy Sims, looking at a tractor that needed a new alternator, when he heard Aaron calling his name from the yard. He came out to find Aaron standing at the edge of the group with an expression of concentrated urgency. "You need to come," Aaron said. "What is it?" "Franklin is talking, and you need to hear it." Lucas followed Aaron to the cluster of chairs under the cottonwood tree, where Franklin Cross had apparently been holding court for the better part of 20 minutes. The old foreman was sitting with his back straight and his big hands resting on his knees, and there were 8 or 9 people gathered around him, including Dorothy, who had stopped moving for the first time all day, which alone indicated the significance of what was being said. Source was there too, standing slightly apart from the group, her arms folded across her chest in the posture she used when she was holding herself together. Lucas stood at the edge of the circle and listened. Franklin Cross was talking about the ranch as it had been in the late 1980s, before Douglas had taken full ownership from his own father. Robert Caldwell, a man Franklin described with quiet reverence as the hardest working and most decent person he had ever known in the agricultural business. "Robert Caldwell built this place with his hands," Franklin said. His voice was the voice of a man who had been telling stories for 74 years and knew how to fill a space with them. Not his father's money, well, some of his father's money, but mostly his hands and his sense and his willingness to be wrong and try again. He had a saying, "Land doesn't lie. Whatever you put into it, it gives back. Not always when you want, not always in the form you expected, but it gives back." He paused, and in the pause several people shifted in their chairs with the particular quality of movement that means something is landing. "Douglas was Robert's son, and he had some of that in him," Franklin continued, with the careful honesty of a man who is not going to prettify the truth but was also not going to be cruel about the dead. And he had some other things in him too, things that didn't serve him or the people around him. That's the honest way to say it. He looked at Source. "You have your grandfather in you. I've seen it all day. The way you run this gathering, the way you make people feel like they matter. That's Robert Caldwell. He did the same thing." Source's jaw moved. She did not speak. And this young man, Franklin turned and looked directly at Lucas, who had not expected to be seen, had positioned himself at the outer edge of the circle precisely to be a listener rather than a subject. "I don't know you. I just heard today what happened at the fair in 2007, and I want to say, in front of everyone here, because it should be said out loud and not privately, that what Douglas Caldwell did to you was wrong. You were a boy, doing his job, and doing it well, and he used you as an audience for his own foolishness, and that was a wrong thing to do." The yard was completely silent. Lucas stood very still. He was aware of every person in the circle looking at him, and beyond them, the wider gathering pausing in their conversations to listen. He was aware of Brent somewhere behind him, of Dorothy with her hands clasped in her lap, of Aaron sitting cross-legged at Franklin's feet with his face tipped up, taking in everything with the absolute attention of a child who understands, instinctively, that something important is happening. He was aware, more than anything, of the ground beneath his feet. "Thank you," Lucas said. His voice was level. He had made it level. But something in it, some vibration at the bottom of it, was not entirely level, and everyone there heard it. Franklin nodded. "You came back," he said simply. "And you came back right. That's the whole story." It was Dorothy who started crying first, not loudly, not dramatically, but in the quiet and total way that Dorothy Vasquez did everything. She simply had tears on her face and made no move to wipe them away, which was its own kind of statement from a woman who is not given to displays. Then Linda Hutchins, who had worked cattle under this same sky for 12 years and was not a sentimental woman, made a sound that was not quite a word and pressed her hand briefly over her mouth. Then Caleb, who was 24 and had grown up hearing about the Caldwells as a fixture of the county the way you heard, about the water tower or the county road, just part of the landscape. Permanent and given, looked at Lucas with an expression of uncomplicated feeling that was more eloquent than any speech. Aaron stood up from his cross-legged position and walked to Lucas and took his hand. He did not say anything. He just stood there holding Lucas's hand, with the matter-of-fact physical certainty of a child who has decided that this is where he should be. Lucas looked down at him. Aaron looked up. His face was completely serious and completely open. Franklin says land doesn't lie, Aaron said. That's right, Lucas said. So that means this land knows you worked on it before, even when you were a kid. I suppose it does, Lucas said. Aaron considered this with the gravity it deserved. That's good, he said finally. That means it remembers you. Sewers found Lucas at the live oak trees by the seasonal creek in the late afternoon, when most of the guests had gone, and the yard held only the evidence of the gathering, folded tables not yet put away, a forgotten sweater on a chair, the cottonwood tree casting its long shadow eastward. She had been crying. She had clearly been crying and had stopped and had come to find him with her eyes still slightly bright and her chin slightly lifted in the manner of a woman who will acknowledge the crying but will not apologize for it. She sat down in the grass near the bank of the creek. Lucas sat a few feet away. The water was lower than it had been 3 weeks ago, but still running, still making its persistent sound over the stones. My grandfather used to bring me here, she said. Robert. I was very small and he used to bring me here and tell me the names of the trees and the birds and the plants along the bank. He knew all of them. He said a person who owns land should know what lives on it. She paused. My father never brought me here. I don't think he knew the names. What kind of trees are they? Lucas asked. Live oaks, she said. Those tall ones along the water are cottonwoods. The low scrubby ones near the fence line are cedar elm. She pointed as she named them, a quiet precision. The birds you hear right now, that's a painted bunting. They're here in summer. The loud one earlier was a curve-billed thrasher. She paused. My grandfather also knew which plants along the bank were edible and which were medicinal. I remember some of it. Teach me, Lucas said. She turned to look at him. He met her eyes steadily and without performance. Teach me, he said again. I'm going to be on this land for a long time. I should know what lives on it. Source held his gaze for a moment, and something in her expression completed a shift that had been in progress for weeks, something that moved from the guarded assessment of the first morning to something warmer and less defended, the expression of a person who has decided, carefully and with full awareness of the risk, to trust. All right, she said. I will. She began with the creek plants. She told him the name and the use of each one in the steady, confident voice of someone transmitting something that had been given to her and that she understood was hers to give forward. He listened. He asked questions. She answered them, and her answers led to more questions, and the conversation moved from the plants, to the water, to the soil, to the history of the land itself. The geological history, the indigenous history, the generations of farming and ranching that had shaped the particular character of this particular 1,200 acres. The sun went low and the light went gold and they talked, and the creek ran, and the painted bunting sang somewhere in the live oaks, and neither of them noticed the time until Aaron appeared at the top of the bank looking for his mother and announced that Dorothy had said dinner would be ready in 10 minutes and that they should come now because Dorothy had used her serious voice. They climbed the bank together. Aaron took both of their hands, one in each of his, and walked between them back toward the house with the easy authority of a child who has decided how things should be and sees no reason to question it. The kitchen window was bright ahead. Dorothy's shape moved behind it. The cottonwood tree stood enormous and still in the last of the day's light. Lucas walked across the ground of the Caldwell Ranch, his ranch now, but also theirs, also Robert Caldwell's, also every person who had ever worked this land, and been shaped by it and left something of themselves in it, and he felt in his chest something that had been wound tight for 15 years finally, slowly, release, not disappear, not vanish as though it had never been. Release, the way a hand releases something it has been holding, not because the thing wasn't worth holding, but because the time for holding is over and the time for something else has come. He was 34 years old. He had cracked boots once, and now he had Lucchese calfskin, and neither pair was the point. The point was the ground. The point was always the ground. The land doesn't lie. It remembered him. And he was home.